Good morning, good afternoon, or good night, and welcome to Command Power, the show where we talk about all things Magic the Gathering with a focus on Commander. And today we are continuing our series of the top 10 underplayed cards in Commander, and today we're going to be doing the color blue, everybody's favorite color, of course. Not mine, it's red. So as a reminder, we are only considering cards that are played in 3% or fewer decks on edhrec.com for this list. And without further ado, let's get started. At number 10 we have Mystic Reflection. For 1 colorless, 1 blue, it's an instant. Choose target non-legendary creature. The next time one or more creatures or planeswalkers enter the battlefield this turn, they enter as copies of the chosen creature. And it has Foretell for 1 blue. It's in 22,090 decks with 3% of the deck share. Now you can get up to all sorts of shenanigans here. If somebody plays their crazy big threat like Avenger of Zendikar or something like that, you can make it enter as a copy of a 1/1 soldier token or something. You can also do it the other way around. So whenever you play some small creatures or something that makes a bunch of tokens at once, you can choose the biggest creature on the table and all of your tokens are going to enter as copies of that creature. So this can be used defensively or offensively. It can stop many games from being won, or it can make you win a bunch of games if you use it correctly. This is just a perfect kind of commander card that can get up to all sorts of cool shenanigans and makes you think outside the box, and it should be played in many more than 3% of decks. At number 9 we have Body of Knowledge. For 3 colorless and 2 blue, it's a creature avatar. Body of Knowledge's power and toughness are equal to the number of cards in your hand. You have no maximum hand size, and whenever Body of Knowledge is dealt damage, draw that many cards. It's in 10,959 decks, or 2% of the blue decks. Now, that's a lot of text on this, but what does it actually mean? Well, what it means is that most people are not going to be attacking you with their big creatures out of fear that even if you just chump block with Body of Knowledge, you're going to draw a bunch of cards equal to whatever the biggest power of their creature is. As long as this is alive, they're not going to attack into you with big things, or they're going to have to use a removal spell on this, and if they use it on this, they're not using it on something else. At the same time, you can also use it offensively. You can attack in with this if you already have a big hand size, and it's very unlikely to be blocked because people just don't want to give you more cards. In addition, just having no maximum hand size is a nice bit of extra text on this. I'm just surprised that this is only in 2% of decks, because it feels like it slots into most blue decks quite easily. Number 8 is Tidal Barracuda. For 3 colorless and 1 blue, a creature fish. It's a 3/4. Any player may cast spells as though they had flash. Your opponents can't cast spells during your turn. It's in 10,592 decks, or 1% of blue decks. This is a really interesting one, and it's very, very strong. You get a 3/4 for 4 mana to start off with. That's not even that bad. It's not that easy to remove. And then, yes, it's giving everybody's things flash, so other people are going to be doing a lot of messing around with each other during their turns, but they can't play anything during your turn at all. So you just get to get the benefits. You can play stuff whenever you want, but nobody can mess with you at all during your turn. That is really sweet. This is just a really good card, and it helps all sorts of strategies, because blue has a lot of cards that they might want to drop on an opponent's turn, and having this just lets you do that, and then immediately get the upkeep trigger, or immediately be able to tap it during your turn if it has a tap ability. It's just very strong. I'm surprised that it's only in 1% of decks. Number 7 is Illusory Ambusher. For 4 colorless and 1 blue, it's a creature, cat illusion, 4/1 with flash. Whenever Illusory Ambusher is dealt damage, draw that many cards. It's in 2,974 decks, or 0% of decks. So almost all of the same things that apply to Body of Knowledge apply here, except this one you can flash in, so they're not going to see it coming. And when you flash this in and block their 10/10 or something, they're going to be really pissed, because nobody wants to be using a removal spell on a 4/1 creature, but they're probably going to have to, or you're just going to get super far ahead. This is a really fun card, and when people don't know that you might have it, it just really, really can blow them out. Love it. At number 6 we have Una's Grace. For 2 colorless and 1 blue, it's an instant. Target player draws a card, and it has Retrace, which means you can cast it from your graveyard as long as you discard a land. It's in 2,291 decks, and 0% of blue decks. So this card is really good late game. It gives you a bunch of inevitability when you have a bunch of mana and you have a few cards in hand but you have a bunch of lands. What do? Well, you can just keep casting this from your graveyard and just draw a pure gas, because you're filtering out all the lands to pay for it, and then you're just drawing better and better cards. It's basically an eternal filter, something that's always there in the graveyard that you can just keep using. It's a really, really great way to get ahead if the game goes long enough, and it shouldn't be in 0% of decks. Number 5 is Master of Predicaments. It's a 3 colorless, 2 blue creature sphinx, 4/4 with flying, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player, choose a card in your hand. that player guesses whether the card's converted mana cost is greater than 4. If the player guessed wrong, you may cast the card without paying its mana cost. And it's in 2057 decks, or 0% of decks. This is a card that will appeal to people who really enjoy mind games. I particularly love this card because there's so much you can do here. So basically this becomes a massive sub-game of bluffing. Like, do they think you're lying about choosing the bigger card or choosing the smaller card? And it just gets into this great dynamic where you kind of have to see who's the better bluffer. And I think whether they guess right or wrong, it just makes some memorable moments, and it's a really fun card. Number 4, we have Gather Specimens for 3 colorless and 3 blue. It's an instant. If a creature would come into play under an opponent's control this turn, it comes into play under your control instead. It's in 1129 decks, or 0% of decks. This is really, really sweet. It's, again, similar to Mystic Reflection. You can absolutely blow out people here. So if somebody plays Avenger of Zendikar, I know it's an example we use a lot because it's one of the ones that makes multiple tokens, but if somebody plays that and you play this in response, suddenly you're getting Avenger and all the tokens. And another side effect of this is if you play this to get one of their creatures, it kind of stops them from playing any more creatures for the rest of turn. So if they're a creature-based deck, you're essentially time-walking them because they can't play anything else because you just get it. So this is kind of a sweet card that does a few different things that can be used in a few different ways. Number 3 is Trusted Advisor. For 1 blue, it's a creature human advisor, 1/2. It says your maximum hand size is increased by 2, and at the beginning of your upkeep, return a blue creature you control to its owner's hand. It's in 888 decks, or 0% of decks. This might look really weak at first sight, but it's actually really good late game, like a few of these cards are. The fact that it gives you +2 hand size is nice, but that's not the main point of the card. The main point of the card is bouncing your creatures late game so you can reuse their enters the battlefield triggers. And if the worst comes to the worst and you don't have anything to bounce, you can just return it, and it's just 1 mana to bring it back down again, so that's fine. But yeah, bouncing your Muldrifters, bouncing your Mnemonic Walls, your Archaeomancers, all of that kind of stuff, your Trinket Mages, this is all just really, really sweet value, and it can actually provide you a lot of card advantage in the long run because there are a lot of creatures with good enter the battlefield abilities in blue. So I'm surprised this is in such few decks. Number 2 is Counter Lash for 4 colorless and 2 blue. It's an instant counter target spell. You may cast a non-land card in your hand that shares a card type with that spell without paying its mana cost. It's in 153 decks, or 0% of decks. This sword, again, is really expensive for a counterspell, but once you've blown somebody out with this once, you'll probably change your tune on it. Countering their big creature and then dumping your big creature at instant speed feels really good. Of course, you want it in a deck with a decent amount of fatties, or else it's not going to be quite as good. But yeah, you can get absolutely crazy amounts of value from this, and being able to plonk a creature down during an opponent's turn whilst denying them their card too is really good. And finally, number 1, we have Declaration of Naught. For blue, an enchantment. As it comes into play, name a card, and it has blue, counter the spell with that name. It's in 503 decks, or 0% of blue decks. And this is a really good one to deal with commanders. Basically, when you play this, one player can never play their commander for the rest of the game. That is really frustrating for that player, and it means that they're going to have to deal with this. But this can totally shut down strategies that are really reliant on commanders. And if it's a mono red deck you're facing against, then they're basically locked out of using their commander for the entire game until they can get rid of this. It may sound unfun, and it probably isn't the most fun card, but it is incredibly strong in commander against certain decks and in certain metas. So if your meta is one that's really based around specific commander abilities, then this card might be good to include in your deck, and it certainly should be in more than 503 decks. So that has been our list of top 10 underplayed blue cards in commander. If you feel we left anything out, please don't hesitate to let me know in the comments below. I read all the comments and respond to them all. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to click like and subscribe. It really helps the channel, and I'm trying to grow right now. And until next time, take care.